another reason behind this. I don't want to suggest that he died for any other reason, that two evil people killed him, and we should always remember that. Nonetheless, this all happened during lockdown, or a lot of it did. He wasn't going into school where things might have been picked up, and social workers at that period were not allowed to go to houses in person to check up on children. And so the terrible question I have to ask is, do you think there are other awful things going on up and down the country that have been hidden by the pandemic?
I think there's no doubt that lockdown was such a shock to the whole nation that it weakened the system of support. But actually, in Arthur's case, he did have a number of professionals around him. He did have home visits. We have to wait to hear exactly what's happened there. And what I would say, I was in school during the lockdown. I went into school every single day. And I know my colleagues were picking up the slack and going out and seeing and checking on children they think were the most vulnerable. It was a terrible time. It was a terrible time for the whole nation. It's also why I think we must not close schools again. You know, we must not.
So that comes to my next question, because everybody hopes there is not going to be pressure for new lockdown and new restrictions and the Omicron threat goes away again in some form. But it is possible that at some time before too long, the Prime Minister will say to you and to the rest of us, I'm really, really sorry, but this is such a serious threat, the Omicron variant, that we are going to have to close schools again. What would you say to him?
Well, I mean, I would urge him not to close schools. And let me just give you a sense of this. I mean, coming out of lockdown, I went and put out a survey to the children of England and got more than 500,000 responses. That's the biggest survey ever in England and probably across the world. And do you know what the children told me? How that their biggest concerns, their mental health and well-being from being away from school, from their friends, their concerns about their education, their concerns about not being able to be together out and play. They want things back to normal. They took a huge hit for us. We must not close schools again. And my head teacher colleagues across the country are incredibly good at managing this situation. I watch them rush into support the most vulnerable. And I would definitely advise not to do this, and if there is any other option.
Well, let's talk about, I mean, there's always other options. And I'm just wondering what you think the rest of us, the government, society generally, should be prepared to do to ensure that schools stay open and that these children, who will never get their education back fully, don't have to go through that again.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, whilst online learning was put into place and everybody stepped up to try to do that, children have told me, that's 500,000 children have told me, that although that was helpful, it could not replace what a teacher taught them.
So we should accept more restrictions to keep schools open, perhaps.
I think children have done a huge amount for us. They've made a great... I have 250,000 text responses, children telling me how they miss their older relatives, how they miss funerals, how they don't know how to make friends anymore, and, you know, real concerns. I went around the country in April and May, from Grimsby to Scunthorpe to Bristol to Handsworth, and talked to hundreds of children. We can't let them down. We need. I mean, as long as we can keep them safe, you know, and nothing is ever 100% safe, we need schools open.